So this week, we see that Joseph has been thrown into prison. And the writer here tells us in the text specifically that it was the king's prison. It was the king's jail. And we shared last week that he wasn't sent to regular prison where all the bad guys are, where all the hardened criminals are, where the people that kill and rape and murder, steal, and all of that. He was sent to white-collar crime, and that's where he was put by Potiphar. Now, Potiphar had the right to sentence him to death and to kill him under Azarian law for what his wife, Mrs. Potiphar, claimed was rape. Now, we know that Joseph never raped her. She, in turn, attacked him, and he ran for his life. But she spun it like people do, and it became his fault that he attempted to rape her. Mr. Potiphar does not send him to prison or for execution. He puts him in the king's jail. Now remember, we're talking about favor. Favor follows you wherever you go. When you come to Jesus and you give Jesus your life, God places favor on your life. So favor followed him from the pit to Potiphar's house. Favor has now followed him into jail. Now everywhere that favor leads you, everywhere that favor follows you, he's with you. There is a lesson to be learned at those places in life. And we talked about Joseph was a young, stuck-up, rich kid. And God had given him a dream in his messed up mind. He's 17 years of age. He hasn't a clue as to what's going on. He has no responsibility. He's daddy's favorite. Out of all the other 9 brothers, he's the favorite. And dad makes it known he's the favorite. So the brothers hate him. This kid is dysfunctional in every way. But God gives him a dream in his dysfunction. And we just shared that earlier, a minute ago, that God doesn't wait until you are all that spiritually to give you a dream. He will give you a dream in your dysfunction. When you give your heart to him, you are still dysfunctional. Did you know that? Just because you gave your heart to him and made a decision, I am going to follow Jesus, doesn't mean that overnight you become all that. You're still a mess. But God, because of your relationship with Jesus, he plants dreams within you to show you where he's taking you and where you will go, what you will become in life. And it's those dreams that we need to focus on, knowing that that's where God is taking us. That God is step after step in our life. That's where we're going. But because you're a mess and I'm a mess, we're not qualified for where God is taking us. There is a learning process to get us from here to there. And we saw that Joseph got his coat taken from him, which represented his identity. He was thrown into a pit. He was sold into slavery. Can you see that God is hammering away at this young man's pride and teaching him then responsibility in Potiphar's house and how to run that household? Favor is blessing him even there while favor is teaching him. Then he has a mishap. Mrs. Potiphar goes off the rail. She thinks she's all that, and she wants this young man. And as a result, he gets thrown in the king's jail. Favor is again following him. But what's happening is he's learned all the lessons he can learn while in Potiphar's house. God has to transport him into the king's jail to learn a whole new set of lessons. And in the king's jail, he's going to come in contact with those that have displeased Pharaoh and have been thrown in that jail. He will learn about Pharaoh's household. He will learn about royalty. He will learn about what not to do in Pharaoh's presence so you don't get thrown back in jail. He will learn all of those skill sets while in prison, and favor puts him again in charge of the prison. Everywhere he goes, favor is raising him up to a place of being in charge or being the guy that makes the decision. He was in charge of Pharaoh's house, Potiphar's household. Now the text will tell us he's in charge of the very prison. But something happens in this prison. While he is there, he meets the cupbearer and he meets the baker. We're going to find that in Genesis chapter 4. And Genesis chapter 40. And I'm going to be reading from verse 1 through verse 23, because we're going to see God is still working in his life. So, I meet people all the time, and I have this keen sense that I can see where they're at, but I can also see where they're going. And I can see some of the stuff they're going to have to go through to get there. It's plain to me. I don't know how and why I do that, but I just do that. I can look at people and almost immediately know where they're going and what it's going to take to get there. But here's the thing. I meet so many people that while God is producing something in them, it's in that process that they get frustrated and they give up. And they say, I don't want to go through that. I don't want to learn all that. I don't want to become that. It's too difficult. And give up. The difference between you, if that's you, and Joseph is Joseph never gave up. Joseph had a tenacity that if it's going to hurt and it's going to bruise me, it will not break me. It won't break me. I may come out scratched up, but it's not going to break me. I will see the fulfillment of what God has placed in my life as a dream for my life. Okay, so we come to chapter 40. Joseph now is in prison, and it says, and as time went on, it happened that the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt crossed their master. And the king of Egypt, Pharaoh, was furious with his two officials, the head cupbearer and the head baker, and he put them in custody under the captain of the guard. And it was the same jail where Joseph was held, and the captain of the guard assigned Joseph to see to their needs. Now, would that be a coincidence? When favor is in your life, there is no coincidences. And after they had been in custody for a while, the king's cupbearer and baker, while being held in jail, both had a dream on the same night. And each dream having its own meaning. And when Joseph arrived in the morning, he noticed that they were feeling low. So he asked them, the two officials of Pharaoh who had been thrown into jail with him, what's wrong and why the long faces? And they said, we dream dreams and there's no one to interpret them. Joseph said, don't interpretations come from God? Tell me your dreams. First, the head cupbearer told his dream to Joseph, and he said, in my dream there was a vine in front of me with 3 branches on it, and it budded and it blossomed, and the clusters ripened into grapes, and I was holding Pharaoh's cup. I took the grapes, squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup, and gave the cup to Pharaoh. Joseph said, here's the meaning. The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will get you out of here and put you back to your old work, and you'll be giving Pharaoh his cup, just as you used to do when you were his cupbearer. Only remember me when things go well with you. Again, tell Pharaoh about me and get me out of this place. I was kidnapped from the land of the Hebrews, and since I've been here, I've done nothing to deserve being put in this hole. When the head baker saw how well Joseph's interpretation turned out, he spoke up and he said, my dream went like this. I saw 3 baskets on my head. The top basket had assorted pastries from the bakery, and birds were picking at them from the basket on my head. And Joseph said, this is the interpretation. The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will take your head off and impale you on a post, and the birds will pick your bones clean. Well, I guess he was sorry he asked that one. Actually, there is no message in that, so I'm gonna leave that alone right there to just your imagination. Someone said, well then, why did the cupbearer live and the baker die? And there are a lot of thoughts about that, and one of the thoughts that I tend to gravitate towards is this. Pharaoh, as all pharaohs of that time, and most leaders today, they had kind of a paranoia. They always thought somebody was trying to kill them, that there was somebody going to do them in and usurp the throne and take their power, and they lived under that fear. That's why they had a cupbearer. The cupbearer's job was not only to make sure that they brought the cup and it was clean and the wine was fresh, but the cupbearer was also supposed to taste the wine. Because if it was poison, Pharaoh knew he would die and then he wouldn't touch the wine. So it's the job of the cupbearer to not only present the wine, but taste it. And the baker, it was the same with the baker. The baker was to taste whatever was presented to Pharaoh, because Pharaoh was like a meth addict on meth, paranoid. You know how meth addicts are. They're afraid everybody's out to get them, and they're always looking, always checking behind them and afraid of they're peeking out the curtain every 5 minutes because every car that goes by is somebody trying to get. Well, that's the way pharaohs were. They were like meth addicts. They were afraid that everybody was out for them. So apparently the cupbearer was cleared of his charges and was brought back into service, but the baker was killed, and many believe it was because the baker was guilty. And one day Joseph would be sitting at the table with Pharaoh eating, and God had to remove the person that attempted to kill Pharaoh because he would probably attempt to kill Joseph. And God had a unique way of removing him. But here's the point in that. This is the point. It's you do not have to be afraid of people who stand in your way, people that want to block you from your dream, people that say that you can't get there, you'll never do it, it's impossible. You don't have to worry about them because God has a unique way of removing them. You don't have to remove them. Sometimes you got to dodge and weave and you got to step around them and pay them no mind, but you don't have to worry about removing them, because when God puts a dream there and you are pursuing the dream and favor is moving with you, He will remove every block that is there to stop you. And He has unique ways of doing it. I love that song. This is how I fight my battles. See, sometimes we sing it, but we don't listen to it. I once had a prophet tell me, he said, the problem with you, Scott, is you have God's Word. You have a lot of God's Word, because I was a reading maniac. I read the Bible nonstop. He said, but you often, it all stays up here, and it never drops 12 inches to here. And it's the drop that makes the difference. So sometimes we sing, this is how I fight my battles, this is how I fight but we go out and fight them every which way but praise. We think we'll just wage an attack. And people that come at us on social media, we go right back at them. Well, your mom smells like dirty socks. And we do all kinds of cuckoo stuff. Stop it. Just stop it. Let God fight your battles. Worship God. Praise God. You'll sleep better at night. You won't have to take anxiety medicine. You'll be calm because you know that awesome God is fighting on your behalf. So God takes care of the baker. And we see in this portion of chapter 40 that the cupbearer is released from prison, put back into service. But what does he do? He forgets Joseph. He forgot him. Joseph is the one that interpreted his dream, which eventually got him out of prison. And as soon as he's out of prison, he forgets the very guy that helped him. He forgot about Joseph. In fact, he forgot about Joseph for 2 years, not counting the time that he was in prison with Joseph. Nobody knows how long. He could have been there for 5, 6 years before Pharaoh, before he had the dream and Pharaoh let out. Nobody knows. But we do know that for 2 years after being out, he forgot about Joseph. Can you imagine being locked up in that hellhole of a jail, waiting for the guy that got out to remember you, and he just doesn't remember you? Day after day, week after week, month after month, 2 years go by. Pretty soon you begin to feel like he'll never remember you. You see, here's the thing about favor. You see, favor doesn't always work in the time frame you want it to. You want it right now, and sometimes it cannot happen right when you want it to because God is setting a bigger stage. Your stage sometimes is too small, and you want favor to show up and show out right now, but sometimes God is saying, no, I'm putting you on a greater stage, and that's where favor will show up and show out. You need to know that even when you don't see it, reminds me of another worship song, even when I don't see it, He's working. Favor is always working, whether you know it or you don't know it. The other week I shared, in fact, I shared it twice because I gave you one version and then I gave you more details the next week, how I went from driving a forklift to being employed by Citizen Watch Company. And I shared that when I left Hitachi as a forklift driver, they carried my resume. I didn't even know what a resume was. He told me what to write on paper, my boss, and I wrote it and gave it to him as I exited, right? Here's the thing. I did not know that favor was working, that resume was going from Japanese firm to Japanese firm to Japanese firm, and everywhere it went, the story got bigger. I went from being a forklift driver to being a CEO or a vice president of a major division of Citizen Watch Company without knowing it. I didn't know that favor was working. And I didn't know that favor was using everybody that read that resume. You know what the resume had? I worked at Jack in the Box, a fire extinguisher company, and I worked for Hitachi as a forklift driver. How did I go from there to running a company? And I hadn't even run a company yet. Favor was setting a bigger stage. The stage that I was used to was too small. And favor said, no, you've learned the lessons I had for you when you worked for Hitachi. You've learned to be a good forklift driver. You learned to be a good employee. How did they think I knew Japanese management? Because I knew biblical principles. Honor your boss. Honor your workers. Work as unto the Lord. That is a Japanese business mindset. That's why they're so respectful for their elders and their superiors. Me as a believer, I displayed the same attributes. I didn't know Japanese management. Man. But favor said, you've learned the lessons that I was teaching you. I'm now going to promote you, and your platform is too small. I'm not going to show up here. I'm going to show up there. So I went to work for a company in desperation, running illegal parts across the Mexican border. I didn't know it was illegal till I got up to the border, and they told me where to sneak in. And I realized, I said, oh man, this ain't good. I'm going to go to jail for sure. And then they started sending me on my own, which was even scary. I don't want to go there alone. I didn't know that favor was working. You see, you don't always know when favor is working. You just got to know it is. And God is building a bigger platform. God will use people, as He did in my case, to lie to each other and make you better than what you are. That's favor. I didn't tell no lies. Favor did. So blame favor for lying. You see, the cupbearer failed at that moment to mention Joseph. Don't ever put your faith in people. Favor will use people. People are not favor. Favor will even use people that hate you. Favor has a funny way of turning it around and making the joke on them. Favor will use people, but don't ever think that person is your favor, and without them you will fail, because they have the tendency to walk away and leave you at the wrong time. People come up alongside of you. I'm here to help you. I'm here to be there. I'll be your friend. I'll be this. Don't count on it. Because just as quick as they come into your life, they often will leave your life. And if you put all your dependency on them, when they leave, there goes your dream. It's gone with them. Keep your eyes on favor, never on people. And I appreciate the people that come into my life that favor has brought. I appreciate that. And I thank God for that. I thank God for them. And I love them to death. But I know that they can leave as quickly as they came in. For heaven's sakes, you could drop dead tomorrow, and I would be depending on you for everything, and all of a sudden you don't wake up in the morning because God said it's time to come home. And if all my aspirations were tied up in you, there they go. There they go. People don't always do what you expect. But when you look beyond them and you're looking at favor, you have to know that even when they deal you a bad hand, we go before the city council in probably a month. I was in an arbitration meeting last week, and we were arbitrating over some issues, and the arbitrator kept staring at me for some reason, and I thought, man, maybe I wore the wrong color shirt or something. Deborah said, wear brown. Brown's a friendly color. You want to look friendly in the meeting. I wore a brown shirt, but he kept looking at me. What I didn't realize, and he then told me, he said, you know, I watched the city council meeting the other night, and he said, you didn't get a chance to defend yourself. You were robbed of that opportunity. He said, now I can rule right now in this arbitration. I can rule. But he said, what I'm going to do is, he said, I'm not going to rule. I'm going to stand down. I'm not going to rule it. I'm going to refer it back to the city attorney, and I'm going to tell him to put it back in the city council's hands. And I said, I'm thinking to myself, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. I want you to rule right now. And he kept looking at me, and I had this, finally he said, you know, he said, I'm trying to help you because I believe in you and I believe in what you do. I'm trying to help you. He said, if I put it back in the city's hands, they're not only going to have to rule over this matter, but you'll be able to revisit asking them to suspend the fees to rezone the property, which is going to come to about $30,000. He said, you'll be able to ask them to waive all the fees in that meeting, and guess what? You have the platform to tell your story because you're the agenda. No other department's telling your story for you because they mess it up every time. Now, I'm looking at our architect, and he's going, you need to do this one. Go for it. So I said, all right. And I looked over at the zoning, and I said, you know, you guys messed it up the last time because of the way you presented what I was asking. You didn't present it the way I asked it. You misrepresented us. And are you going to do it to me again? Planner said, no. Zoning said, no, this time we're going to go up and tell them what a great job you're doing, and we're not going to do that. We're not presenting anything. We're going to let you present it. We're going to go up and say, this guy, blah, blah, blah. And then I said to head of planning, I said, so do I have the support of all your planners? Are all your planners on board to promote what we want to do? And they said, absolutely. If I've already got their support right now, you're supported by the whole planning department. Now, I don't know. I can't prophesy how that meeting will go out. But you see what happened? In an arbitration meeting, I was looking for one thing, favor with the arbitrator, but his favor did something that I wasn't expected. He bumped it up where the end result will be a waiving of $77,000 in fine and a waiving of $29,000 in fees to apply for rezoning. I was looking for favor, but I was expecting it one way. I was not expecting it another way, but favor had another idea. And as I'm listening to it, our architect is saying, go for it. He's sensing favor. And I was smart enough to say, okay, we'll go put us on the agenda. We're going back. What am I trying to say? Favor works in mysterious ways. Favor works in mysterious ways, but you always got to be looking for it because you have to know it's working. And it works through some of the people that you would never expect. In chapter 41, Pharaoh calls for Joseph, and I'm going to read this text to you. Chapter 41, verse 1. It says, 2 years passed, and Pharaoh had a dream, and he was standing by the Nile River. 7 cows came up out of the Nile, all shimmering with health, and grazed on the marsh grass. And then 7 other cows, all skin and bones, came up out of the river after them, and stood by them on the bank of the Nile. And the skinny cows ate the 7 healthy cows, and Pharaoh woke up. Now, it goes on. I'm going to just paraphrase a little bit. That he has another dream, and it's similar to the first, but this time it is grains. It is corn. It is grains of corn, and it's a single stalk that produces a lot, and then all of a sudden it withers and it becomes unhealthy and it loses its crop. And he calls for all the magicians and the sages of Egypt, and no one could interpret the dream. Now he's getting pretty upset. Out of all of these folks, no one can interpret the dream, and he's frustrated. So the story goes on that the cupbearer remembers Joseph. And he said, he says to Pharaoh, I probably should have mentioned this to you 2 years ago. Maybe I'm going back to prison. But I didn't. I forgot. But there is a guy in prison that can interpret dreams because he interpreted my dream. And here I am serving you again. So Pharaoh calls for Joseph. And they give him a haircut. They give him a change of clothes. And they spip him up. And they rush him. The text says in the Message Bible that they ran him to Pharaoh because Pharaoh now is pretty anxious. I want somebody to tell me about my dreams. So they get him before Pharaoh, and it's interesting that Pharaoh says to him in verse 15, Pharaoh says, I dreamed a dream, Pharaoh told Joseph, and nobody can interpret it, but I've heard that just by hearing a dream, you can interpret it. Now, he's never met Joseph before. Joseph has just come out of prison. They gave him a bath, gave him a haircut, shaved, all that good stuff, made him look as good as he possibly could. Because remember, we said weeks ago that if you went before Pharaoh and you had a blemish, he would put you to death. If you went before Pharaoh and you weren't ecstatically happy, because they're so egotistical, they thought that just coming into their presence should make you that happy. And so if you didn't come in and smile and grin and act like you were given the biggest Christmas present, that they would have you killed. So Joseph has been prepped now to know how to come before Pharaoh and not get killed. So he comes before Pharaoh, and Pharaoh says to him, I've heard that anybody that tells you a dream, you can interpret it. Now, if I was counseling Joseph, my counsel would be, Joseph, whatever he says, agree with him. Don't ever contradict Pharaoh, because that will get you thrown right back in prison. But Joseph doesn't take my advice. Joseph answered him and he says, no, but God. No, Pharaoh said, I heard that you can interpret the dream. And Joseph says, no. And then, but God. But the NIV says this, that Joseph says, no, I cannot do it. But there is a God who interprets dreams, and he will give you the answer. What happened to this egotistical 17-year-old kid, all full of pride, so much pride that when he has a dream, he has to run right out to his brothers who already hate his guts. The Bible said they hate him so much they couldn't even talk to him. And he has to go out saying, guess what? I had a dream. I'm going to be your boss one day. What happened to this kid with that kind of an ego problem? Now he's saying, I can't interpret dreams, but there is a God who can. And he will interpret your dream. What happened? One of the greatest things God has to pull out of your life to promote you is pride. That is the biggest, number one, and the hardest to get out of a person's life is pride. Solomon said, I believe Ecclesiastes, Solomon said, he said, the test of a man's character is when he's promoted. You know a person's character when they're promoted. And before God can promote and elevate you, because if you think you're a something now, and he promotes you, oh, you'll really think you're something then. You'll think you're everything plus a bag of chips. You will be the person. And God doesn't promote you for your own self-glory. He promotes you for his glory. To say, this is what I can do with a life that loves me. This is the person that loves me. This is what I will do in their life. But people with pride and ego never give God the glory. Pretty soon it's all about them. So one of the things that I've experienced, and I've seen God do it over and over and over again, that is humbling a person before he promotes them. What does Proverbs say? Pride comes before a fall. Pride comes before a fall. But those that are humble in spirit are blessed of the Lord. So Joseph has had the pride beat out of him. Sometimes the things we go through, the only purpose we're going through them is to have the pride beat out of us. Sometimes when you fail, the reason you failed is God's just trying to show you you're not all that. You get a couple of successes under your belt, and pretty soon you start thinking you're infallible. And you start doing stuff without asking God and without praying and asking God for favor and blessing. And you just think you can just go out there and make it happen until one day you run into the brick wall and you realize you're not all that. You don't have all the answers. You're still dependent on God. No matter how much he blesses you, you're still dependent and reliant on God. So the text goes on to tell us that he interprets Pharaoh's dream. And as a result, Pharaoh says to the elders who see the interpretation, he says, is there any man more qualified than this man to run this nation according to the dream he interpreted? And they say there's no one more qualified. And the story ends on such a remarkable note. Pharaoh gives him his signet ring, Pharaoh gives him royal clothes. Pharaoh gives him his daughter to marry. Pharaoh promotes him as the second ruler. Pharaoh says, only under me there is nobody greater than you except me. I'm the only one greater than you in this entire nation. You will rule the nation according to those dreams you had. 7 good years and then 7 years of famine. And Joseph does that. They stockpile for the 7 good years, which brings them through the 7 years of famine. The story is absolutely remarkable. He goes from prison one day to running a nation the next day. 24 hours. That's favor. When you've learned the lessons that God wants to teach you and you needed to learn to be promoted, he will promote you that fast, because right then and there's nothing holding promotion back. Now let me leave you with this. I'm going to leave you with this. You see, favor will show you what abilities God has placed within you. That's part of favor. Recognizing abilities that God has placed in you from before you were born. See, sometimes you know what those are. You may be good at math, you may be good at this, or sports, or what have you. You may have an idea. But sometimes there are abilities that reside in you that you don't know until God begins to point them out to you. And as favor begins to mature those abilities, as he matures you, favor will begin to use those abilities to promote you. Does that make sense? I have a unique ability that drives anybody close to me absolutely nuts. That's why I don't have hardly any friends. I can spot in a room anything out of place immediately. I can tell you which chair is not lined up properly in this auditorium just walking across the back. Deborah can say, I've lost my keys. I don't know where my keys are. I can say, they're behind the mirror on the bathroom counter, left side, about 2 inches from the mirror. I just have that ability. I can walk into your place. This is why you don't want to invite me to your house. I can walk in and tell you where you dusted and you didn't dust before we said one word. I have a way of doing that. I scare myself sometimes. I just that way, okay? Ask my kids. You can ask Desiree after church. She will confirm that I am absolutely a nutcase. But I know that about me. I just know that. Most of the time I just keep quiet because I know it annoys people. I can tell you every spot on this carpet that we shampooed it, but it didn't come up. Okay. I know that about me, and it drives everybody nuts. But do you know that I built a business on that one attribute that I have? Restaurant repair. Our ministry, the funds that we were being supported of had come to an end because the property didn't sell. Our organization depended on the sale of properties to support us. I was sent to San Francisco with a year's support. 6 months after being there, the support, I got a call, come back home, come back. My pastor, come back. The property didn't sell. The church didn't close escrow. The fund that you're supported out has gone dry. Come back. I had no money. That means I'm out of money. That's where I was getting my support. And I had a team with me. I brought a team of people with me. We launched a church in San Francisco. I said, I can't come back. I can't go back because I'm not abandoning my team. They left everything to come with me, and I'm not leaving them. Long story short, somebody suggested that I start a business working on restaurants, exclusively restaurants, not homes. Very competitive in San Francisco because every home builder, they have the grandma out there, cousins out there, kids out there, babies out there working. You can't compete with those rates. You got your whole family doing it. So I went to the Embarcadero 3. I was scared. I didn't know what to do. Took the escalator up, and I said, whatever restaurant's at the top of the escalator, I'll start there. We had all kinds of people in our church. We had a church to pay for the rent. We had people living in our programs. We dealt with prostitution. We had, 20 prostitutes housed. Exotic dancers from up on Columbus and Broadway. And I said, everything rests on my shoulders. Am I going to get the money to do this? So I sat there and I came up out of the top of the elevator and I looked in all the glass windows. I could see that they were busy because stupid me, it was lunch hour. So I sat on a concrete bench and watched everybody eat lunch. And I just stared at them, trying to work up the courage to go in. And I waited till the crowd left, most of the crowd left, and I went in, and the gal at the reception desk, I said, I want to talk to the owner. She said, what about? She said, I made up everything on the spot. I said, I want to help your restaurant. She said, you do? She said, what do you do? I said, I do just about everything. And she said, all right. So she goes over to a man sitting at the bar, and I can hear them talking, or see them talking. And she comes back. She said, he'll see you. He's eating lunch. Go over. He was sitting at the bar eating lunch. So I went over. His name was Rick D'Alessandro, and his partner was Bob Stewart. And I walked up, and he says, so I hear you want to help the restaurant. He said, what do you do? You see that unique gift that I have? I immediately, favor started to bring it out. And I walked in. I saw everything in the restaurant by the time I walked from the entry to the bar where he was sitting. And I said, well, you see the warped floor over there to your left? We fix those. Your bars, some of the finishes coming off, we redo bars. He said, and he's looking at me, and I said, you see all the high dusting, all your open vents up there and your ducking? You got dust up there. Look up, dust. It was all painted black. I said, you see all the dust? That falls on people's plates, and when they get dust, they're going to report you to the health department. The health department's going to write you up, and the San Francisco Chronicle is going to put it on the entertainment page that you've been wrote up for health things. And I started just naming as many things as I could name. And he said, you do all that? And I said, yeah. And he said, do you work on kitchen? I knew nothing about a kitchen. I made that up too. Yeah, we work on line equipment. I do all kinds of line equipment work. He said, you do? He said, you do all that? I said, yeah. He said, what's the name of your company? I made that up too. I couldn't think of anything, so I said, Restaurant Repair Services. He said, son, you're hired. I was a lot younger then. He said, you're hired. You start right away. We got some line equipment, so I got everybody in our housing program, mostly girls, and we started to go work on restaurants at night so they could stay open during the day. He asked me later, do you do janitorial? I said, yeah, we do. I didn't know how to clean a restaurant, but we brought a bunch of girls in that still dressed like hookers because they had just gotten saved, and we started cleaning restaurants. Word spread all over the Embarcadero. You got to hire these company. This company comes in with hookers, and I can honestly tell you that the owners, instead of going home after they closed the restaurant, they'd sit there and have drinks at the bar watching the girls work. Where am I going? Oh, we built a whole business with accounts throughout San Francisco. We held the Zim's account, which was like a Denny's chain for the city. We had accounts all the way down to Cupertino. We ran crews night, every night, all night, 7 days a week. We're running crews. So how do you go from being broke, or gonna be broke very quickly, being cut off financially? How do you go from that within a week, birthing a business that's supporting my family, all of our housing, and our church from that one business? How do you do that? Favor. Favor. You see, favor will take your unique gifting and he will create space and room for it for you to excel using it. You have to know what that is. What has favor gifted you with? And what will favor use in your life to promote you? What is that? Because people that are not in touch with that, usually people that lack purpose, they lack direction, they don't know what their gifting is and what favor's doing in their life. They don't know. They don't know what it is. And they lack direction. They sit aimlessly. They have no clue what they're going to do. They get frustrated because they have no purpose. They get depressed. They get disappointed in God. All kinds of things because they lack direction. What are your dreams? You need to write them down. What are your dreams? What are your dreams? Some would say, well, I want a family. I want relationship. Write that down. What are your dreams? I want employment. What kind of employment? Write it down. And then ask God, what will it take for me to get from what I wrote down to doing it? What will it take in my life? And allow God to begin to show you. Well, I want to be a great musician. I want to write songs. I want to be on the worship team. Well, I want to pastor a church. Whatever it is, God will drop dreams in your heart. Then He will begin to show you what gifting you have for that dream, and then He will show you what He needs to do further in your life to get you there. God does not operate in the vacuum of secrets. He will tell you. He will make it clear to you. He will make it obvious to you. And as He does, your path will start to light up because you know where you're going. Well, Pastor, I want a relationship. Well, what happened to the last 5 you had? Maybe you need to figure out what ruined them and let God improve you for the next one that may be the good one, right? I mean, I'm just saying. And God will do it. Let me give you this story, and I'm going to close with this. What makes a spider so good at catching bugs and flies? I don't like watching these things that I see on social media about animals that hunt each other, lions, and they eat each other, and I don't like that because I don't like to see animals die like that. But once in a while it catches my attention in the fierceness of the animal world. Do you realize that in all the animal kingdom, in order to survive, you have to stalk your prey, hunt your prey, you have to capture your prey, you have to kill your prey? Do you know the spider doesn't do that? The spider simply builds a web. No prey around, he just builds his web. He just builds the web. And there's something unique about spider webs is that they're stickier than all get out. And if you've ever walked face first into one, you know what I'm talking about. It's like, ugh, get it off me. Ugh. They're sticky. And the spider builds the web, and the spider sits back and waits for the prey to come to him. He doesn't stalk it, he doesn't hunt it, and he doesn't kill it. He waits for the prey to come to him. And the prey will enter into the web and get stuck. But have you ever thought, how come the spider doesn't get stuck? How does a spider spin a web and not get stuck? Because spiders secrete oil out of their feet. So while everybody else getting stuck in his web, the spider simply glides across the web with no trouble at all, never getting stuck in it. No other animal has that gifting but a spider. That's why spiders don't hunt. They don't exert energy to go get their meal. They don't have to. They simply build a web and wait for the prey to come to them. God has gifted you not only with favor, but God has made you unique. You are one of a kind. There's not another me on the planet. Thank God. There's only one of me with my abilities. There is only one of you with your abilities. You need to ask God to show you what those are. And then let God begin to put things together in your life to do great and powerful things. And I promise you He will. I've said it a million times. You can work at an entry-level job, and that might be good right now, but that's not where God has you. If you dream big enough, you can dream owning that place, owning a franchise, franchising across. There is no limit to what God can do with a person when you let Him work in your life. Amen.